We ready to go? Good morning. My name is Mike Bramer. My pronouns are he and him. I would like to give you a little of my background in order to set the stage for my presentation. I look at the banners behind me, and I can say that I am a past or present practitioner under at least 3 of them, and perhaps even 4. I was a Christian for about 70 years. I am presently a secular Buddhist, which means I am not a monk, but I do study and carry out a Buddhist practice. And I am a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church, and I participate once in a while with our humanist program here. Each of the above churches has a set of suggested beliefs and behaviors. The Christian church has 10 commandments. Buddhism has 5 mindful precepts, and we have 7 principles. I can be an active Buddhist and an active member of this church, finding no conflict between the two. My subject today is the 7th principle, the interdependent web of all existence. In preparing my presentation, I recall the following Buddhist prayer. May all beings everywhere with whom we are inseparably interconnected, be fulfilled, awakened, and free. May there be peace in this world and throughout the entire universe, and may we all together complete this spiritual journey. In searching for inspiration to prepare this presentation, I approached Reverend Michelle asking for her help, and under her direction, I found the book, Our 7 Principles in Story and Verse by Reverend Kenneth Collier. He shares in the book the story of how the 7th principle came to be, and he reflects on his interpretation of it. His interpretation aligns closely to my own and speaks to why I hold the 7th principle dear. The 7th principle was adopted in 1985 as part of the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalist Church. Reverend Collier shares that Universalists adopted the 7th principle after searching for a way to understand and even justify ecological action as a spiritual calling. In his text, Reverend Collier states, one of the basic principles of ecology is that no living thing exists in isolation from its environment. Every creature and every species depends on every other for its existence, so that elimination of a species necessarily weakens the environment and endangers the existence of the remaining species, including ours. The theological implications of the inclusion of an explicit statement of our interconnection to each other and the universe is, in Reverend Collier's words, staggering. Unitarians and Universalists, long before the merger, both put a huge theological emphasis on the individual and the individual's way of understanding their own spirituality. The individual experience was central and nearly unquestionable. Individualism was and is still in the universalism a huge part of our theology. However, the inclusion of the 7th principle called us into a relationship with each other and with the world. Reverend Collier and the other Unitarian Universalists who crafted the 7th principle were thinking about ecology and the way that ecology fundamentally calls us to acknowledge the simultaneously truths that each organism is an individual, and also that each organism exists in relationship with its environment. These UUs were calling us to explore and know the relationship between the individual as a theological entity and the way that each of us as individuals is part of an interconnected theological world. Unitarian Universalism is about this world, not another world or any specific other world, but keeping us attuned to our internal and external experiences. There are other principles, the 7th principle and it's called the democratic processes, and the 6th principle and the goal of world community that call us into our shared lived experience. But it is the 7th principle that ultimately creates the theological space to explore the interdependent experience of being human on this earth. Reverend Collier talks about how The theological becomes the physical when he says, interdependence is an energy that flows in both directions. I am dependent on you, and you are dependent on me. We cannot escape each other. When our government gets tough on crime, that hardness rebounds not only on criminals, but on all of us. And when we raise the level of anxiety and despair among the poor by forgetting that they are people who need help, then we raise our own level of anxiety, fear, and despair. It is a universal doctrine, the common saying, what goes around comes around. Reverend Collier asks us to hold in mind the Buddhist concept of karma and the Christian teaching of Jesus saying, that which you sow, also you shall reap. These are parallel attempts to describe the physical, the biological, the ecological, and even the spiritual. There is a place in his book where Reverend Collier drives home this interdependence by asking us to look not at ourselves as a piece of the whole, but instead to look at the whole as ourselves. He writes, what happens to defenseless children in the homes of our land happens to all of us. The battered, the abused, the neglected, the poor, the unloved children are not only our children, they are us. Are they helped by a hardened heart or a softened heart? We are interdependent. What we say or do about and to others, we say and do to ourselves. We are helped by a hardened heart. Are we helped by a hardened heart or a softened heart? There is a momentum in our relationship with other people. Cruelty is a spectrum, and there are ways, unnecessary criticism, failing to offer each other grace, that cruelty can sneak into our interactions with others without our even noticing. And yet, if we treat others with cruelty, it becomes easier for cruelty to enter the interconnected relationships of our lives. It becomes easier for us to treat others in ways that are not consistent with our values, or for others to treat us in these ways. What goes around comes around. It becomes easier to feel the tension of a conflict in these spaces and relationships. They say it is harder to pick a side of a conflict when you are sitting in a circle. Perhaps that is because you're interconnection more, looking in others' eyes. If we want to stop the escalation, if we want to stop the chain reaction of cruelty, we can begin by affirming the lives of those who frighten us and make us afraid. Reverend Collier explains that creating life-affirming practices is what will save us from the world we fear. Do you want to stop or even slow the drug trade? Then begin by recognizing that we are all interdependent. If the addict depends on you, then you depend on the addict. Do you want to stop the drug trade? Then give the addict the same level of respect that you expect from the addict and work to make life without drugs more attractive than life addicted. Begin by making schools work. Begin by making it possible for poor parents to take meaningful jobs. Begin by supporting clean, bright, safe, and loving daycare. Begin by working for safe and humane prisons. Begin by affirming the lives of those who frighten you and threaten you and make you afraid. In the words of Terry Sweetser, the best defense is strong affirmation, and it is the seventh principle that calls us deeply into this affirmation. It is the seventh principle that calls us to love each other as we love ourselves, to love those we fear and those we distrust as we would love our closest friends, to build a world for them that is so bright and lovely that it breaks the cycles of cruelty and helps to create the beloved community. The seventh principle calls all Unitarian Universalists not only to acknowledge the interconnected web of all existence, but to respect that interdependence. And respect is an action for many of us. Respect is about our behavior in this world and the way we relate to the people, animals, and the universe we find ourselves in. This thing, respect for the interdependent nature of our world, comes at a high cost. It has so many deep impacts on the way we think about and live our lives. we have to reevaluate and even give up on some of the self-centeredness we bring to our way of knowing ourselves. When we understand ourselves both as individuals and as a part of something much larger, our interdependence begins to become apparent, and our society's false reliance on the concept of individual falls away. Collier sums it up as such. Do you see how powerful the idea of interdependence is? It has to do with justifying ecological action, but it is far more than that. It is about how we live our lives and treat each other and conceive of our communities. It is about how we are woven into life's web. It is also how biology becomes a metaphor for the depths of life where meaning and fulfillment and love dwell. Buddhism teaches that one of the primary methods of supporting this principle is to live our lives trying to be faithful to the practice of the 5 mindful precepts, and doing so while following a life of loving kindness toward all creation. Buddhists believe that through the karmic law of cause and effect, praying for peace will help bring peace about. We pray for peace for the community of all beings, but we recognize that peace begins with each of us. Thus, we also pray for our outer and inner peace as members of this community. In this way, we learn to better love, forgive, and accept ourselves. The purple phrase for the benefit of all beings should not exclude ourselves. We are interconnected, interdependent. This is so as true religiously and spiritually as it is biologically. If what goes around comes around, and I believe it does, it makes sense for us to send love around. Love and help and generosity and kindness and understanding and a gentle, healing, and helping hand. This is what I want to come around to me, so that is what I try to send around. I'd like to close with a Buddhist prayer. May all beings be happy, content, and fulfilled. May all beings be healed and whole. May all have whatever they want and need. May all beings be protected from harm and free from fear. May all beings enjoy peace and ease. May all beings be awakened, liberated, and free. May there be peace in this world and throughout the entire universe. Thank you all.